I started out trying to understand my love for cilantro, and somehow I've ended up here. And yeah, this is definitely the weirdest thing I have ever done for a video. This is MinuteFood. Cilantro, the leaves and stems of the coriander plant, is one of the most polarizing foods out there. I mean, people disagree about all sorts of food, but it's usually because some people enjoy the flavor and others don't. When it comes to cilantro, though, people on each side of the divide experience the flavor in totally different ways. Cilantro lovers, like me, get some version of fresh, herby, citrusy deliciousness, while cilantro haters often refer to it as soapy. Cilantro is basically the dress of the food world. But why do people have such completely different experiences with this herb? Why soap specifically? And where do the bugs come in? The common thread here is a group of chemical compounds called aldehydes. Aldehydes tend to be volatile. They're likely to fly into the air, where they can enter your olfactory system and get sensed. So lots of aldehydes produce strong smells. Think formaldehyde or citronellol. And because smell is a big part of taste, strong flavors. Think cinnamon or vanilla. Or cilantro, because cilantro is packed with a bunch of different aldehydes. And coincidentally, some of these particular aldehydes also happen to be the byproducts of a particular step in the soap-making process. So cilantro haters are right. Cilantro tastes like soap, but only to some people. I, and most other cilantro lovers out there, don't get that soapy note. And at least to some extent, this difference seems to be genetic. By comparing the genomes of people who think cilantro tastes soapy to the genomes of non-soap tasters, researchers have identified a few relatively common genetic mutations that seem to be associated with sensing that soapiness. One is in a particularly relevant part of the genome, a region that codes for the production of olfactory receptor 𝗁6A2, basically a protein that helps us sense smells. But not just any smells, aldehydes. And not just any aldehydes, 𝗁6A2 is particularly sensitive to the type of aldehydes shared by cilantro and soap. The idea is that people with these genetic variants might be particularly good at sensing those soapy aldehydes, and as a result, may be more likely to dislike cilantro. The rest of us just might not be sensitive enough to these compounds to notice the soapy flavor. But it's not quite that simple. I actually have one of these genetic variants. And as I've noted, I am definitely not a cilantro hater, and I don't get any soap. What's more, not everyone without these variants likes cilantro. So there's obviously more going on here. Like maybe there are also genetic variants that make people extra sensitive to the other aldehydes in cilantro, the herby, fresh, citrusy ones that us cilantro lovers adore. And there are other things beyond genetics, like personal experience, that can contribute to whether someone senses soapiness. For instance, many flavor chemists, who have a lot of practice picking out scents, say they can pick up soapy notes in cilantro. Now, I keep talking about soapiness, but that description really only started being used for cilantro around the turn of the 20th century. Before that, cilantro haters often referred to the herb as bug-like. And that's because those very same aldehydes in cilantro and soap are also produced by certain insects, like these stink bugs. A few hundred years ago, when soap wasn't as big a part of daily life as it is today, it was bugs that were the most familiar source of these particular aldehydes. In fact, the name coriander, the plant cilantro comes from, may even stem from the word chorus, Greek for bedbug. And I mean, what? Do some insects really smell like cilantro? As a cilantro lover, might I like the stink of a stink bug? I did the only reasonable thing I could think of. I went looking for the little guys. But not only are these bugs overwintering now, they aren't very common where I live. So I did the second most reasonable thing I could think of. I started contacting scientists who study these bugs to see if they'd send me a few. And crickets. Which I kind of expected. Not only was it an admittedly weird request, some of these species are invasive in the US, so it makes sense that researchers weren't falling all over themselves to ship them across the country. But finally, I connected with Angela Lovero, an incredibly helpful and incredibly open-minded entomologist at the New Jersey State Department of Agriculture, who agreed to send me some brown marmorated stink bugs. They'd be frozen, but she assured me they'd still have their signature stink. So I waited, only somewhat patiently, for the precious cargo to arrive. That is how I ended up with a box full of bugs. The first thing I noticed was they are really lovely bugs. And the second was that they didn't actually have an obvious smell. That may be partly due to their stint in the freezer, partly to their long trip across the US, and partly to the fact that they weren't wild caught. According to Angela, lab-reared stink bugs seem to be a bit less pungent. Maybe because with no predators, they reallocate their resources away from stink making. So I decided to try squishing them to draw out the stink. And, I kid you not, these little guys smelled shockingly like cilantro. I mean, they smelled delicious. But because there's so much variation in how people respond to these particular aldehydes, I had to know what other people thought of the stink. So for the second time during the creation of this video, I sent out a bunch of very weird requests. In the end, more than 24 people came over to take a whiff of my new friends. And with only a few exceptions, basically everyone was floored by how much the bugs smelled like cilantro.
More like cilantro than this cilantro right here.
The cilantro smell is a lot more powerful in this one than it is even in the cilantro.
It's like stronger, a little stronger.
Very potent.
Yes, it is.
It's very cilantro-y. I was shocked.
There is no question that the aldehydes shared by these two very different life forms give them very similar scents. But since the overall mix of volatile compounds is different, not identical scents. And some people seem to pick up more stink from the stink bugs than others. One sniffer said the bugs smelled like salsa from a trash can. What nobody picked up, even the cilantro haters, was soapiness.
You sense any soap?
No soap.
Not quite.
Nope.
Which at first didn't make sense to me. These bugs contain the very same aldehydes that produce the soapy sensation in cilantro. But then I found out that most of the haters don't actually smell any soapiness in cilantro either. They only taste it. And based on advice from Angela, we didn't actually eat the bugs. Research does suggest that the smell sensing you do through your nose and through your mouth as you eat are somewhat different processes. And it's possible that it's just easier to sense those soapy aldehydes via your mouth. There is one more thing I learned during all this sniffing. Most of the haters wish they liked cilantro. It sucks to dig into a burrito and taste a mouthful of soap. And here's the good news. There is hope. First, there's a lot of research demonstrating that the more you eat a particular food, the more likely you are to enjoy it. And anecdotal evidence suggests that this does happen with cilantro, at least for some people. You can also try changing how you prepare cilantro. In addition to aldehydes, cilantro contains enzymes that break down the aldehydes. Research suggests that a few easy hacks, like cutting or crushing cilantro, letting it sit after prepping it, and cooking it, can help activate these enzymes and encourage them to do their thing, leaving behind fewer soapy aldehydes. If none of that works, try using coriander seeds, which contain some of the same volatile compounds as the plant's leaves and stems, but not the soapy aldehydes. As for me, I will take cilantro any way I can, even, it turns out, in stink bug form. This is the kind of video I love making. Not because it's about one of my favorite foods, although that is a bonus, but because it took me on a totally unexpected journey that left me, and hopefully left you, with a new, much deeper understanding of food and cooking. But these kinds of journeys, whether they involve sending dozens of emails to hunt down just the right stink bug expert, preheating a ridiculous number of pans, digging into the complicated ins and outs of electromagnetism, or cooking way too many chicken breasts. These journeys take a lot of time, energy, research, and experimentation, none of which really help us keep the lights on here at MinuteFood. So if you love the kinds of deep, weird dives we make and want to help us keep making them, please consider joining our Patreon community at patreon.com/MinuteFood. You will get access to gorgeous printables, discount merch codes, early access to our videos, fun polls and conversations, and right now, some great outtakes from this bug-tastic video. But most of all, you'll be helping support MinuteFood. So please, come join us at patreon.com/MinuteFood. We would love to have you.